Welcome to Sidequests, the podcast that explores the strange, surprising, and often forgotten rabbit holes of history. Because sometimes history isn't what happens when people are trying to change the world. It's what happened when the world was making other plans. In the middle of a cold January afternoon in 1919, a massive storage tank in Boston's North End exploded. Not with dynamite, not with gas or oil, with molasses. More than 2 million gallons of thick, sticky syrup came roaring through the streets at 35 miles per hour. Buildings crumpled, horses vanished, people were buried alive in caramel-colored sludge. It sounds like something out of a cartoon until you read the casualty list. This is the story of the Boston Molasses disaster, a tragic, bizarre, and completely real industrial accident that proved even the sweetest things in life can't kill you. In 1915, the U.S. Industrial Alcohol Company constructed a massive tank in Boston's North End, a dense working-class neighborhood full of immigrants, families, and tightly packed buildings. The tank was a monster, 50 feet tall, 90 feet wide, and designed to hold over 2.3 million gallons of molasses. Molasses was big business. It was used in food production, yes, but also in the manufacture of industrial alcohol, which was used for explosives during World War I. So the company wasn't just making syrup, it was supplying the war effort. But here's the thing, the tank was rushed into service. It had only been briefly tested, and not even with molasses. They filled it with water once to check for leaks, then quickly drained it and got to work. Spoiler, it leaked. Locals reported molasses oozing down the sides almost immediately. Children would actually collect it in cups. The company's response? Paint the tank brown so the leaks wouldn't show. And still the tank kept filling. By January 1919, the war was over, but demand for alcohol remained high. The tank was nearly full, and it hadn't been properly maintained. Then came a sudden change in the weather. Boston had been in the grip of freezing temperatures, but on January 15th, the thermometer shot up to over 40 degrees Fahrenheit, unseasonably warm. That rapid warming thinned the molasses, increased internal pressure, and may have triggered fermentation gases building up inside the tank. Shortly after 12:30 p.m., the metal gave way. The tank burst apart with a sound some witnesses described as a machine gun, others like a thunderclap, and still others like the world's strangest earthquake. In the next few seconds, the streets of Boston would be hit by one of the stickiest and deadliest disasters in American history. At 12:40 p.m., the tank ruptured. Not cracked, not leaked, ruptured. More than 2.3 million gallons of molasses burst into the streets in a single rolling surge. Eyewitnesses said it came out like a tidal wave, 25 feet high at its peak, moving at 35 miles per hour. And it wasn't just water with a little thickness. Molasses is dense, about 40% heavier than water. That made the wave massive, heavy, and lethal. The first victim was a city worker standing on a nearby platform. He was thrown against a wall and killed instantly. Then came the damage. Wooden buildings flattened, steel girders twisted like pretzels. A nearby firehouse was literally ripped from its foundation. An elevated train track was torn apart, nearly sending a train off the rails. People were caught mid-step. Some were crushed by debris. Others were sucked under the molasses, unable to move, suffocating in syrup. 21 people died. More than 150 were injured. There were stories of children swept away, horses sucked under, and rescuers stuck waist-deep trying to pull others free. One man was reportedly carried nearly 100 feet by the wave. Another victim, found days later, had been pinned to a wall by a wagon and drowned. The sound? Witnesses described a low rumble, a boom, and a strange high-pitched gurgling as the wave spread outward. Some thought it was a bomb. Others thought the ground had opened up. In a matter of seconds, a neighborhood was buried, not in flames or rubble, but in molasses. And the nightmare had only just begun. Because while the flood lasted only minutes, the aftermath would take months to clean up and years to understand. In the immediate aftermath of the flood, the North End looked like a battlefield. Except instead of smoke and fire, there was syrup, Rescue workers rushed in, police, firefighters, Red Cross volunteers. But they weren't prepared for molasses. Every step was a struggle. The goo was knee-deep in places, thicker than mud and still cold from the winter air. It clung to everything: clothing, tools, horse hooves, skin. Rescuers described it as like walking through glue. Dogs that wandered in got stuck. Rats drowned. Bodies were hard to find. It took days to recover all the victims. And the cleanup. That took weeks, some say months. City crews hosed down the streets with salt water. Fireboats pumped water from the harbor to flush the syrup into Boston's sewers. Still, the stuff stuck around. Locals said molasses was tracked all over the city by shoes, wagon wheels, and tires. People found it in train stations, on public phones, and in their homes. One woman said she found it on her kitchen floor for years after. The Boston Post reported that everything a Bostonian touched was sticky, which sounds funny until you realize that molasses doesn't just stain, it hardens. And then there was the smell. It lingered. Even after the mess was gone, the north end had a faint, sickly sweet scent that hung in the air for months. But beyond the cleanup was something darker. Many survivors were permanently injured. Some had broken limbs. Others suffered respiratory problems after inhaling molasses. Families sued the U.S. Industrial Alcohol Company, beginning a legal battle that would last for years. People wanted to know, how did this happen? Who was responsible? And could it have been prevented? The answer to all three questions was yes. So what caused the Boston molasses disaster? The short version: negligence. The U.S. Industrial Alcohol Company rushed the tank into service. They didn't have it properly engineered or inspected. They never had it pressure tested with molasses. And when it started leaking, they painted it brown to hide the drips instead of fixing them. Experts later testified that the steel was too thin, the rivets were poorly installed, and the company ignored obvious warning signs, but they didn't ignore profits. The molasses in that tank wasn't just for candy. It was destined for alcohol production, including industrial use during wartime. And after the war, the company kept stockpiling it for rum, liquor, and continued sales. When lawsuits were filed by victims' families in the city of Boston, the legal battle became one of the first major class action suits in U.S. history. It dragged on for 6 years before the company was found liable and paid out over $600,000 in damages, a huge sum at the time. The disaster helped usher in new building codes, inspection requirements, and corporate accountability laws. It also became a lasting reminder of what happens when companies cut corners and regulators look the other way. Today, there's a small plaque in Boston's North End marking the site, and every January, someone inevitably reminds the internet that, yes, the city was once nearly drowned in molasses. It sounds funny, but it was deadly, because sometimes the most surreal tragedies come from the simplest things: poor design, ignored warnings, and too much pressure building up until something bursts. Some disasters strike with fire or thunder. This one struck with sugar. The Boston molasses disaster is one of those stories that feels like it belongs in a tall tale or a cartoon. But behind the stickiness was real tragedy, real negligence, and a wake-up call for industrial safety in America. It's a reminder that sometimes history's strangest headlines carry the most important lessons, even when they're soaked in syrup. That's it for today's Sidequest. If you enjoyed this little detour, subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend who loves history's odd corners. This has been Sidequests, because history is what happens when the world is making other plans.